Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and continuing series, the Unported Playlist, where I take a look at some of my favorite unported arcade games of all time. And today, for the first time on the channel, we're actually playing and reviewing Castlevania the Arcade. Now, I released this for everyone to enjoy last spring in 2023, and I never actually took the time to review the game in and of itself. There was a series of 3 videos in which we released it and then got the controls working so you could play it in the comfort of your own home. So I figured today, being the spooky season, the kickoff to October, what better game to talk about than Castlevania the Arcade? And this is one of those games where I knew about it for the longest time, but I never got to play. Screenshots and videos made it look awesome, but a lot of times when you're anticipating something you can't quite get to yet, when you actually play the game, you're kind of let down because the idea of what it was you built up in your head does not match what the actual game is. But I'm so thankful to say Castlevania the Arcade delivers on every premise I hoped it would, and so much more. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But this is a very rare arcade cabinet. I think at this point in time I know of 2, maybe 3 of them left in the world. So being able to bring this to you guys last year so you could all enjoy it was amazing. Because honestly, to me, an unplayable Castlevania game just didn't sit right with me. And that is always the fun in these sort of things. Basically how this works is you hold a whip in your hand. For this playthrough I'm holding a Wiimote on my PC. And by moving your arm back and forth across the screen, you whip just like you were an actual Belmont. Additionally, you have a trigger button in which you can shoot projectiles as well. So this is both a light gun game as well as a motion controlled Castlevania game, which is a very interesting and unique combination that you really don't see. But I will say here, it 100% absolutely works. You can let the enemies come closer towards you so you can whip them and save those projectiles, or you can shoot them to try to speed up the game. Because you only have so many hearts, you can upgrade the quantity in between levels, but otherwise you really want to save those for very strategic moments. Now right off the top, one of the things I love the most about this game is the overall atmosphere. This is about as pretty as Castlevania has ever looked in my opinion. Yes, we have the Mercury Steam games and they are fun, but obviously those aren't made by Konami. This to me is the pinnacle of what 3D Castlevania could have been graphically. When you marry that to an absolutely incredible game and you just have a recipe for Castlevania success. And again, this was a type of game that you couldn't play for the longest time unless you were like 2 spots on the globe and you had to hope that the arcade cabinet wasn't broken. So now if you didn't realize this was out, you can go download it and play it this Halloween and have an absolute blast. And that is exactly what it is. It takes the Castlevania formula, it takes the environments, it pivots them over to a light gun on-rail shooter and whip game, and it just 100% works in every single respect. All of the graphics, all of the animation, the music, the sound, the play style just is something you probably never experienced before. And that is really hard to say in the Castlevania franchise because there's dozens upon dozens of games and a lot of them share very similar gameplay mechanics. So getting something like Castlevania in a light gun game is just a ton of fun, and it kind of goes side by side with the Silent Hill light gun arcade game from Konami as well. Although if you ask me, Castlevania the Arcade wins 10 out of 10 times as to which game would be the better one compared to Silent Hill. That's not to say Silent Hill isn't a good game, this one is just absolutely spectacular from start to finish. And it's just such a fun formula. I mean, would you really expect before something like the Nintendo Wii was super huge, that Castlevania would be in arcades with a light gun and a whip in your hand? And it's a very interesting setup as well. It has a light sensor on the end of it. Kind of acts more like the PlayStation Move controller than it does a Wiimote in some respects. But you're going to get so many iconic enemies in the Castlevania franchise in this game. Like this Bone Dragon right here is one of the mid-bosses. It's just seeing something that you know, love, and remember from the series, but you're seeing it in the first-person view, which is something that Castlevania really does not do whatsoever. And that is the great thing. It feels so familiar yet so foreign at the same time. But the one thing that's been consistent across all Castlevanias is the soundtrack. This is a 10 out of 10. Listen, and I'll be right back with more gameplay. I mean, Castlevania has such an iconic soundtrack and it sounds so good here, and if you do want to play this game and for some reason you aren't getting sound effects, you have to install a very specific Creative Labs application and add this game so you get EAX audio included. I will leave in the description below the name of that program and the link to a tutorial for it, because on some sound cards it will not play the sound effects, because this was supposed to be and was a Windows XP Service Pack 3 game, but of course I'm playing it here today on Windows 10. So this is something that will run on pretty much any modern system, or if you have like a retro PC that's not too old, you can totally get away with it there as well. But as this Minotaur just comes shooting through the door, I love how all of the different levels in this game change up the overall pace. Some of them are quite slow. You're kind of picking at opponents, you're waiting for that opening on your whip to be able to attack them. Other levels like this here with the Minotaur, it's absolutely crushingly fast from start to finish. And trust me, you're definitely going to use continues in this game. It does take a long time to get used to it and to understand exactly what is asked of you. And the best part is there's multiple paths, different hidden areas, different switches behind certain paintings that you can flip. I'm not going to show them all to you, I want you to discover them for yourself. But this game does have a ton of replayability, and I just love how dark the game is as well. The designers weren't feeling compelled to make everything so evenly lit that you could see absolutely everything in the environment. It's pretty, but it's dark, the way you would expect a horror game to be. So big credit to Konami for making sure they didn't up the brightness to try to show you too much. And that Minotaur right there, a classic Castlevania enemy, just looks so good within this engine and this era of 3D. And it really makes me want Konami to announce more Castlevania games. At least at the time of recording this audio, and I do work ahead, they have not announced anything new in the franchise. But I love that that Minotaur just absolutely gets crushed under the boulders, and his spirit basically burns out of his back. Now as we move into the cavern here again, more classic Castlevania. I love that they take all the enemies from previous games and areas from previous games and rework them into 3D for an on-rail shooter and whip game. I'm really not sure what genre this would even be. I want to call it a light gun game, but it's more like a light whip game with a light gun mechanic. But of course we get some of these merman looking creatures coming in as well. Another classic Castlevania enemy, and it looks so good in 3D. I love the shine on them, like they're actually coated in some sort of slime or water. And I just wonder why Konami made this game in the first place. Obviously they make arcade cabinets, or did. Now for the most part they're just a patch slot company, unfortunately. But this is one of those things. It got made, it barely got distributed, it kind of came and went. Everyone knew it existed, but no one was ever really able to play it. And I love all of the boss battles in this game as well. They're against iconic enemies in the Castlevania franchise, and they just feel absolutely huge. Fighting this water dragon right here, it's just such an epic experience. He is towering above you, and you're going to have to use those projectile weapons to kind of do some poke damage at him until he ducks his head enough to be able to whip. And you'll see right now I'm playing as the Vampire Hunter. There's 3 different characters in the game, one of which you need to change the INI files for to unlock with a flag. Each one's going to have a different whip power, a different sub-weapon, and different sub-weapon energy as well. So you really want to find the player that works for you and kind of learn to play the game around that. Once you pick your character, definitely stick with them. It's going to be a ton of fun. And I love that you actually get to ride on the back of the water dragon. You get thrown off onto this little piece of firmament here, and you get to finish the fight. Kind of reminds me of the dragon fight in Castlevania Legacy of Darkness on the Nintendo 64. And if for some reason you've never played any of the Nintendo 64 Castlevania games, definitely check them out this October. I'm not trying to say they're hidden gems, they're definitely a lot better than the internet would lead you to believe. But as we take the water dragon down here and move on to the next area of the game, again, I just love the fact that this game exists. Of all the type of arcade games Konami made, getting a Castlevania arcade game is epic, because Haunted Castle, the Castlevania game before this, is one of the most challenging and biggest turds in arcade gaming history, in my opinion at least. So I'm glad that Konami righted a historic wrong, in my opinion, and gave us a Castlevania game that actually does play well. You will notice sometimes the loading zones take a little bit long. It's just trying to ingest that file. Because again, whether you're on Windows 10 or 11, this is not the operating system the game was designed to use, so do be patient with it when you are playing it. But I love the character design of the harpy here as well, with that blood red full moon in the background. It is just, again, classic Castlevania iconography, and it works so well here. But I'm going to give you one more taste of the soundtrack before we go to the boss fight with Death, one of my favorites in the game, because again, the music coming across here with the sound effects in Castlevania the Arcade is a 10 out of 10 any day of the week. So listen, and I'll be right back. Such an iconic composition and sounds so good here. And don't forget, if you're looking for other arcade horror games to play this October, I also released Akuma Mortis Immortal that you can play on Windows as well, and that was basically a non-existent horror light gun game from GameWax. So I try to release as much as I can, and it seems to be a lot of times in the light gun and horror genre. But of course, what is the boss right before Dracula? You know the answer if you played any Castlevania game before. That is a boss battle with Death. This is absolutely epic. I love his character design here. That skull, you can see the age on it. But I'm going to tell you right now, this is one of the hardest boss fights I've ever played in an arcade light gun game. Because it doesn't just matter how you whip, it matters where you whip and how fast you do it. If you're playing this game correctly and you're using a Wiimote or any sort of other light gun that acts as a mouse, you should be breaking a sweat by the time you're done, because you're going to be waving your arms around like an absolute idiot. If anyone watched you and didn't know what you were doing, they would think they had a swarm of bees around you and you were getting stung and trying to save yourself. That is how intense this game is, and definitely, if you can, play it with a Wiimote or any sort of other virtual mouse pointer like a Sinden or a gun for IR, because being able to swing your arm to really give yourself the sensation of whipping is where this game really comes alive. And comes alive, it absolutely does. This is one of my favorite Castlevania games of all time now. I know I'm biased and you know I love the arcade light gun genre, but this just does everything right in my opinion. It's got a ton of challenge, it's got a fun gameplay mechanic, it's in the horror genre, it's a light gun arcade game, and it involves Castlevania. Those are everything I would put on my checklist when it comes down to games I absolutely love. And again, if you've never played this before, now is the time. It is just an absolute blast. You can't go wrong with it. And I love that Konami made a title like this. But leave me a comment down below and tell me, have you ever played this game before in arcades, or did you play it when I released it last year? Or maybe you missed that video in the news and you weren't even really aware that this game was out. Because I feel like when I released this, pretty much everyone that played it said they had never seen it before and were excited to be able to do it. And hopefully I can find something new soon to release to you guys as well, because you know I love doing that sort of stuff. But you'll see here, Death is absolutely handing me my ass. He is the hardest boss in the game, bar none. I think Dracula's definitely a lot easier. We have finally taken him down, and of course you're going to see his scythe come straight through into his breastplate, classic Castlevania. And then once his soul leaves, the door is going to open up in the background, and you know full well who is up there. But I'm going to let you discover that yourself when you play. But happy October, we got some horror coming, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.